This is Geometry, Unit 7, working on Day 12, solving right triangles. This is the Part B lesson, the second day's lesson. To solve a right triangle, it's necessary to find the measure of all of the angles and the lengths of all the sides. So when it says to solve the right triangle, we're supposed to find the missing angle and the two missing sides. So to calculate, we can find the measure of any of those in any order we wish. It won't affect the answer. So let's try to find the measure of angle C first. So we know that the measurement of angle C plus the measurement of angle B is supposed to be 90 degrees. B is 57. That's the given. We'll subtract the 57 from both sides. So we know that the measurement of angle C is going to be 33. Those are degrees. Now you could use 33 in the rest of the calculations. I'm always going to use the number that they provide. Assuming they provide a number, I'm going to use that. So 57. From the 57 degree angle, this is my opposite side. This is the adjacent side. And of course, across from the 90 is the hypotenuse. So, let's try to find AB. AB is the adjacent side. I know what the opposite is. Remember that SOHCAHTOA helps you decide which of the three trig functions you're going to use. Sine is the sides opposite and hypotenuse. Cosine implies that you'll be using the adjacent and the hypotenuse. And tangent implies that you'll be using the opposite and the adjacent. So because we're using opposite adjacent to find AB, we have to use opposite because that's the number they have, and we're looking for the adjacent. So tangent of 57 equals the opposite over the adjacent, which is segment AB. Do the cross multiplying. Then we'll divide by the tangent of 57. So AB is going to come up to be 9.09. So in your calculator for that, you would type in 14 divided by tangent of 57. Be sure you know how to use your calculator. You need to be sure you're in degree mode. A lot of the graphing calculators might be in radian mode. So if you ever get a negative answer, be sure that you check your mode to be sure you're in degree. There are some calculators where you have to type the angle before the trig function. If you use your phone to do some calculations with during homework, you cannot use it on tests. That would sometimes work backwards. To find BC, BC is the hypotenuse. We're going to use the opposite and the hypotenuse. So the sine of 57 equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. So BC is going to be sine of 57, which equals 14. The sine of 57 is going to be divided to both sides. 14 divided by the sine of 57 gives us 1669. That's approximately 1669. The bold here at the bottom of the page, those are the directions for the next page. And they should be angle A. So we need to figure out what angle has a sine that's 0.36. So we do our sine inverse of 0.36. This is in the same lesson we've done over the last 2 days. So that's going to approximately be sine inverse. It's good to use parentheses. With a decimal you get the same answer, but with fraction you would not. So any triangle that has an opposite over hypotenuse of 0.36 would have to have an angle of 21.1. Any triangle that has an opposite over adjacent of 0.8, we can figure out its measurement. Tangent inverse of 0.8, 38, 66. And then also one that we've done on a separate day is the cosine inverse of 0.35. That's 69.51. For this next diagram, we're looking for the distance all the way across all of these floor tiles. The edge of these squares are all 8.5, so each edge here is 8.5. We could continue that all the way across. Now I want you to recognize that here we have a right triangle, because a square has a 90-degree angle. Now we need to figure out what this length is for the one square, and then we'll times it by 4. There's multiple ways that we can calculate this. We could use Pythagorean Theorem, and that would mean that we take the hypotenuse squared and equal that to the leg squared plus leg squared. So the hypotenuse squared in this case is 8.5 squared plus 8.5 squared. With our calculator, we can see that 8.5 squared is going to be 72.25. We can add that to itself, or times it by 2, and we'll get a hypotenuse squared of 144.5. And when you take the square root of that answer, the hypotenuse is approximately 12.02. So that's one way you could calculate it. Then we would take that and times it by 4. But I also wanted to point out a few other ways that might come to you. You can look at this and you see you have an isosceles triangle. So an isosceles triangle is going to point out that you have a 45, 45, 90 triangle. If you have a 45, 45, 90, there's a rule that says hypotenuse equals the leg times root 2. This is a special right triangle. So your hypotenuse is going to be 8.5 times the square root of 2. If we take our calculator, 8.5 times the square root of 2 is exactly the same thing we had before, which is 12.02. So it won't matter which one we use. How could we get 45? Another way we could get 45, if you don't know it's 45, what angle has an opposite and adjacent of 8.5? So tangent inverse of 8.5 divided by 8.5, that's going to come out to be 45. So that's a good way we could also be sure that we had 45. With that in mind, we could use opposite over hypotenuse to calculate the hypotenuse. So another way, we could use a trig ratio, which would be sine of 45 equals opposite divided by the hypotenuse. So we know the hypotenuse is going to be 8.5 divided by the sine of 45. We cross multiply and then divide. We've done that many times. We're running out of room, so I'm going to squeeze it in here. 8.5 divided by the sine of 45 comes out to 12.02. So I thought it was important for me to show you that there were multiple ways to come across this type of an answer. Now you have 12.02. We want to have the distance across all four squares. We times that by all four squares, and we get 48.08. Here we have a hot air balloon. The hot air balloon is 600 feet up in the air. If the angle of depression from our line of sight to person B is 42 degrees, that angle of depression is right here. So here we have a zigzag, so we have alternate interior angles, which makes this 42 degrees. So if we want to find the distance to person B, we would use opposite and adjacent, which is the tangent of our 42, equals opposite over adjacent, cross multiply, divide by the tangent of 42, so our x value is going to equal 600 divided by the tangent of 42, comes out to be 666.37. That's the feet. Now, in some other questions that you might do, you could also calculate the distance all the way out to C. You would have a smaller degree, so you'd be tangent of a smaller number, and that would give you a larger result. Then they could ask, what is the distance between B and C? And you would subtract those two values.